Just hearing those brief intros, I think everybody here and listening on the radio can see why we're having a hard time. Fighting for homelessness, fighting against homelessness in the mission, reforming the police, fixing up our public schools and being a champion on the school board. So how are we supposed to decide? So that's the next question that I wanted to ask you guys, is just to really think and present clearly what sets you apart from each other and why it's important that we vote for you as opposed to the person next to you.
Do you want to go first?
Sure.
Well, yeah, as you say, this is a great grouping of candidates that we have here, and it is difficult, I think, for the average voter to kind of distinguish between our positions. But I think what distinguishes us is our experience. What distinguishes us is where we come from in terms of movement politics in the district.
Yeah.
I come out of the movements here in the Mission District out of the 80s, when we were really fighting around Central American intervention, fighting against intervention in Central America, which was a major issue at that time in the Mission District because of our large population of Central American immigrants, be it from Nicaragua, Salvador, and Guatemala. So that's where I come out into politics and activism, is out of those movements. But also in the early 90s, coming into mission politics around the issue of day labor harassment, the forming of the day labor program, the forming of Mujeres Unidas and Activas, the forming of new leadership and new generation of movement-based and community-based organizations that came into being at that time. So my history is deep-rooted. I've been fortunate to do the vast majority of my work, my professional work, in the district. I was a community organizer at Poder, People Organizing to Demand Environmental and Economic Rights, which is a critical and important organization in the neighborhood that later went on to be one of the founding organizations of the Mission Anti-Displacement Coalition, which I was one of the co-founders of MAC as well, when issues began to move from animal rights in the neighborhood to actually displacement issues at the peak of the .com and the live work loft crisis. So I come out of movement-based history in the neighborhood, ranging from youth issues. I was also, when I first met Chris Daly, when he first got here, during the Georgia administration, we fought back against the youth curfew and organized what was called the Youth Uprising Coalition. Yeah, we fought Prop Bell and defeated that. So that was So I have a long history in movement-based politics in the district, and I've developed my leadership based on those movements here. And I went on to work in Mission Housing Development Corporation, where it became one of the vital organizations that fought against displacement and fought against gentrification in the late 90s and early 2000s, and actually spearheaded the Eastern Neighborhoods Plan, and actually calling for a moratorium of the work loss and many other projects we fought in the district over the years. So my experience is grounded well in this neighborhood. I think that's what really makes me different than the other politics of the other candidates, where I think they've had to operate with different
Am I here?
Okay, great.
Nice work. Where's the
Sorry.
tape?
Wow. And that was Erica Sachs. And then we'll mix up the order here and go to Mark.
Okay.
And say your name before you go for the radio.
Sure. Mark Sanchez. I don't know, I guess what sets me apart is that I have a long history, 8 years at least, on the school board, creating legislation and voting progressively consistently over those 8 years. I've led the movement to remove, for example, JRTC out of our schools, remove militarization out of our schools. I worked very hard to make sure that we got one of the most progressive, forward-thinking superintendents in the country to come here, even though we had been bashed consistently in the media, particularly in the Chronicle. We brought Carlos Garcia, and who's basically turning the district around. We're living in a really wonderful district. I've been able to lead the board in unity, to hire him as well, to make sure that we can balance a more than $500 million budget for the last 2 years. So I have a long history of being able to work with budgets, large-scale budgets, and be able to legislate progressively. So that's one thing. I too come out of movements. I co-founded 2 teacher groups. One was Teachers for Change. When I was teaching at Bernal Heights at Paul Revere, that group started there. It was a group of teachers that were very desperate to make changes in our school district. And then from that group, we started Teachers for Social Justice, a group that's still with us, that hosts an annual conference at Mission High that serves about 1,200 teachers from around the country that come out. It's the largest progressive teacher organization in the country. So I have a lot of experience in activism as well as legislation and budgeting.
Cool, thank you.
My name is David Campos, and let me say that I'm very proud to be a part of this field, and not just these 3 candidates, but I know that there are other candidates who are running. I would say 2 things about my candidacy. First of all, I do think that your personal experience matters. And while I was not born and raised in the Mission, I think my experience is very reflective of the experience of a lot of people who live in this district, and specifically who live in the district. In the Mission, I was born in Guatemala. I came to the U.S. when I was 14. My family and I, my 2 sisters, my mom, we literally crossed the border to get here. And I think that that experience of crossing the border and coming here as an undocumented person has, in many respects, shaped my view of the world. And growing up as a teenager here, I was undocumented until the time that I was in college. And I think that there is something about that experience that gives you a very unique and very personal understanding of what it's like to be an outsider in society. And I think that the perspective of the immigrant is something that is very important in this district. And it's especially important now, given everything that's happening around that issue. If you look at the issue of sanctuary, and you see what's happening not only outside of San Francisco, but the kinds of pressures that outside forces are putting on Gavin Newsom and other powers that be in this city. So I think that's a very important distinction. As a gay man, I think that it's very important to have that queer perspective. One of the things that I appreciate about Tom Ammiano is the fact that he's not just progressive, but he understands what it's like as an openly gay man to live in this society, and I think that there are challenges that are unique to that experience. The reason I talk about my personal life is that I do think that what's so unique about District 9 is that we have been represented for so long by Tom Ammiano, and even people who do not agree with Tom Ammiano recognize that one of the things that he has definitely done is that he has been the voice for people who could not perhaps speak for themselves or whose voices were not being heard. He was there fighting for those people, for those who are disconnected and disenfranchised from power, and I think that it's very important that whoever is elected in District 9 continues that tradition. In terms of what makes me different, I think that we all have different experiences, professional experiences in areas of expertise. But at the end of the day, I think the reason why Tom Ammiano, who knows all 3 candidates and knows everyone who's running in this field, I think that the reason that he has decided to endorse my candidacy is because at the end of the day, we don't just need a progressive voice in City Hall, we need someone who's going to push forward a progressive legislative agenda. You are electing a legislator. And I think that at the end of the day, of the people that I'm running, and the reason that I'm here is because I believe that I am the person who will be most effective at pushing forward that progressive legislative agenda. I'm an attorney by trade, and for a number of years, including many years as general counsel of the school district, my job was to advise elected officials, like members of the Board of Education, on how the legislative process works, how to pass legislation, how to make legislative changes happen. And I think that that perspective and that understanding of the nuts and bolts of government and how the legislative process works is something that is very critical and is really needed, because you need someone who's going to hit the ground running from day one. And I think that my tenure on the Police Commission is an example of how someone who has a combination of the background of an immigrant, the background of someone who has progressive values, coupled with that legislative experience, can really make a difference. And I think that we have been able to do that at the Police Commission because of that. And the last thing that I would say is that in this kind of a job, you can't be a one-trick pony. You have to understand a lot of different issues. I have been an attorney for the school district for many years. I know the area of education as well as anyone running in this race. I've been a police commissioner. I know the ins and outs, what works, what doesn't work about the police department. And I have also represented a lot of other agencies, including the PUC. I fought PG&E and Public Power, represented NUNY, represented the Public Defender's Office, represented agency after agency, which gives me a solid understanding of all the issues that are going to come before a district supervisor. And I think that makes me unique.